Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey, and today, special guest Kellis Robinett of the Wichita Eagle and Kansas City Star. Kellis, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be the guest on your podcast.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, and we got to start off with some congratulations. I understand your family had a new addition very recently.
Yeah, I've got a two-week-old son named Oliver. He's doing great. Mom and Dad are a little sleep deprived at the moment, but we're hanging in there. It's all good. It's been a blessing.
I imagine so. Congratulations on that.
Well, thanks.
Well, we'll jump right in here to Oklahoma, Kansas State football, 11 a.m. on Saturday in Norman. Kellis, Kansas State, obviously, I imagine, feels like they should be undefeated at this point with the Auburn game and what transpired there. What's the general feeling around this team right now?
I think you're right. I think people still think they should have won that game, especially when you go back and look at the mistakes they made to lose by single digits to a team like that when there were so many other capable, opportunities to win. That's one they'll remember for a while. But I think they also are excited about the chance to play Oklahoma. Players talked a whole lot about the good vibes they had 2 years ago when they went down to Oklahoma and won that game when a lot of people didn't really expect them to. That was the kind of turning point for that season. That was the year that Colin Klein was a Heisman finalist, and Kansas State won the Big 12 that season, went to the Fiesta Bowl, and a lot of people still point to that win down in Oklahoma as the turning point, the type of victory that showed that they were capable of doing great things and propelled them to a memorable season. So I think they're focusing more on that than thinking back to maybe some missed opportunities this season. And I also think that they're just looking forward to proving themselves a little bit because really that Auburn loss is the best thing on their schedule at the moment. The other teams they've played are not very good. They don't have a win over a winning team yet. So they want to scratch that and get a win against a ranked opponent, and Oklahoma is their opportunity. So I think they're looking forward and excited about the opportunity.
Tyler Lockett obviously had a big drop in that game, which is really uncharacteristic for him. And I think a lot of people around here think back to the monster game he had against the Sooners a year ago, which in many ways really embarrassed and humiliated the OU secondary. I guess how much did that drop affect him, and how's he progressed since then, I guess?
I think he's been progressing pretty well. He kind of strikes me as one of those guys from the Foot Locker ads with a short memory. He didn't really, even after the game, he was upset about it, but in the same token, he was hard talking about just going out and trying to catch more passes to make sure it wouldn't happen again. I think the bigger thing with him is just he really him and Jake Waters they don't seem to have quite the rapport they did last season. You mentioned it last year when Oklahoma came to Manhattan and played. They were just basically, looking at each other and saying, all right, you run, I'll get you the ball. In that first half, they were unstoppable. He had almost 300 yards receiving, just the best day of his life out there playing. This year, they haven't been doing that. They haven't really been connecting on the deep balls. There have been a couple times where Lockett has gotten himself open in the end zone and Waters overthrows him. It's just kind of awkward. It's like that. The one time he actually put the ball in the money in the end zone was that game against Auburn, and Lockett had the weird bobble and went to an interception. So it's an interesting deal. I don't think he's playing any worse than he was last season, but the numbers aren't there. The production isn't there. So he hasn't had that breakout game yet. Does it come against Oklahoma? I'm not sure, but I think they'll try.
What do you make of Jake Waters' season so far and the either development or any kind of regression that he's made this year?
Well, I think he's improved as a leader of the offense, and I think he's improved as an overall quarterback. He's much more confident, and the players look up to him a lot more than they did last season. He's a guy now. He's not splitting time with anybody, so in that regard, I think he's an improved player. He runs a lot better than he did last year. I don't think anybody really expected him to win a game with his legs the way he did against Iowa State. I think the odd thing is that it seems like he's ever since Colin Klein has joined the staff and helped kind of tutor him, he's almost geared his style more toward Klein than he was last year. You're seeing a lot more runs. The coaching staff is leaning on him to run more, especially with some unproven running backs behind him. He's really their top option in the run game in a lot of ways. So it's a little surprising to see that they favor that in certain situations as opposed to last year when he had this just gorgeous deep ball that he could throw. And, when him and Lockett were on together, there were 2 times they threw for over 200 yards in games. So it's a little interesting that hasn't been there, but maybe the Texas Tech game was a breakout because that was one where he almost had 300 yards passing, had 100 yards rushing. So maybe he just hasn't really had the opportunities to throw deep, and he'll get them coming up.
About the Kansas State program as a whole, growing up around here, I followed them, and I know the great success Bill Snyder's had, but it seems, at least to me, like they're just sort of perpetually underrated, and people, they're never a Big 12 favorite or anything like that. Is that sort of thing, and they always exceed expectations, does that sort of thing drive them, or do they care about that, and is that a big deal around Manhattan?
I think it is. I think they honestly like that because even in the times when they have been ranked really high and people do give them respect, they kind of say that they don't want it. They still have the mindset the other way that they're not getting respect, and that's how they play. So I think every year when the preseason polls come out and they're picked 4th or 5th, I think that's what Bill Snyder and everybody likes, just because they can use that as a chip on their shoulder all season and kind of go into games against Oklahoma and Texas, even when, like right now, when Texas is down. I think they still probably look at Texas as a team that if they beat them, it would be a big deal just because they are seen as the more traditional power and whatnot. So I think they use that to their advantage. I think right now it's an interesting situation in that, like I mentioned earlier, the best thing on their resume right now is a loss, but they're a top 15 team. They really haven't gone out and proven a whole lot yet. I mean, beating Texas Tech, Iowa State barely on the road, these aren't great wins. But for once the respect is there, they believe that this team is going to produce down the road. So they put them in the top 15 now, expecting things later on. It's an interesting dynamic for them, but they're still the underdogs against Oklahoma, so they're definitely, just based on the press conference this week, they're definitely going in there with an underdog mentality and hoping to use that to their advantage.
And it's been pretty successful for them before in Norman. I don't think any team in the Big 12 has had the kind of success in Norman that Kansas State has the last 15, 16 years since Bob Stoops been around.
Right, and that's interesting because when I think back historically, the last few trips they've had to Norman, they won them 2 years ago. 4 years ago, Bill Snyder took them there with just a really bad team. Well, I say bad, really mediocre team. Really had Daniel Thomas and no one else, and they pushed them to the fourth quarter. So it's kind of weird when they play on the road or on a neutral site. They always seem to give Oklahoma a game. It's, for whatever reason, when they play at Manhattan, it doesn't happen. The last 2 times Oklahoma's come up here, that's just been blowouts.
The Kansas State is always under Snyder known for their tough defense, and Oklahoma's sort of this year, at least in certain games, been able to grind out wins with Samaje Perine and a pretty powerful run game. Does Kansas State feel good about their ability to stop that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the one thing that they would be a little squeamish on is Trevor Knight. I know he isn't running the same way he was last season, but when they saw him last year, guys like Ryan Mueller just could not figure out the zone read and kept going the wrong way, and that was, other than the Alabama game, that's probably the best game Trevor Knight has had. He just ran all over Kansas State and had a phenomenal day. So I think they're wary of him. I know some people were asking Bill Snyder and K-State players what they thought about Trevor Knight maybe not being as good this year, and they all kind of, double took and said, well, we saw him at his best last year, so that's what we're expecting again. So I think that could be a little bit of a factor, but they definitely do not lack confidence against the run. That's what they've done best all season. They held Auburn down, a team that was averaging over 300 rushing yards a game. They barely let them get anywhere. Texas El Paso was the same way. They were averaging over 300 yards a game, and they got, I think, 59 against them. So if there's one thing the defense can do, it's stuff the run. I don't think they're too worried about that. It's when you get a little bit more complicated with zone read stuff, they have a little bit of problems in that area. But I think overall, yeah, they're definitely confident against it.
Looking at Saturday, yet another 11 a.m. game for OU. I don't know what K-State has been like as far as time, but it seems like we're getting a whole lot more of these morning games between pretty good Big 12 teams this year.
Yeah, it is strange, and Kansas State, they played Iowa State at 11, they'll play this game at 11, they'll play Texas next week at 11. I guess ESPN or the TV people have fallen in love with that new time slot.
Yeah, it's I love it from a deadline perspective, but everything else I'm not too sure about it.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little surprised it's not at 2:30. I don't really understand what was ever wrong with that being the the premier afternoon time. So 11 a.m. Both 11 a.m. I've always felt from a fan perspective is just too early for everybody to get into town and eat and do everything they want to do before the game. And then the other way, if you go at 6 or even later, it can be hard getting back home afterward. It's kind of a shame that they don't have more of those 2:30 games. But yeah, at least for us riders, we get to get some more time to think about what we're doing.
Absolutely. And Kellis, finally, how do you think the game on Saturday is going to play out?
Well, I think it'll be a competitive game, a close game. I think we'll know who the winner is going to be probably at halftime. I think we've seen that a lot from Kansas State. When they go in against games like these, if they can get off to a good start, if they can get a touchdown on special teams or defense, and they can go into halftime with a lead or close to it, then they're going to be there till the end. I think the craziest stat I saw this week was that these teams just are dominant when they have halftime leads. I'm looking at right now. Oklahoma has won, I think, 46 in a row when they lead at halftime, and Kansas State is right behind them at 42 in a row.
Yeah.
So I guess this will be a race to see who can have the most points at halftime. That might decide who wins it. So I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on that. The team that can get up and lean on their running game and try to control clock, I think that's the team that's going to end up winning.
One last thing from me, Kellis. I'm just curious, what is Bill Snyder wearing on the sideline now that he can't wear those windbreakers anymore?
Well, that is a great question. It's it used to be, for sure purple windbreaker. The only question was it going to have the Holiday Bowl, Cotton Bowl, or Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl on the back? And now he's really given in. Now he's got the last couple games he's gone with the home white windbreaker that just says K-State on it. New look that all the coaches wear. He doesn't stick out from anybody else. So that's what I'd say he wears. But you never know. Going on the road, maybe he breaks out something new that K-State handed.
That was such a weird story. But did he seemed to sort of get a laugh out of it?
Yeah, it was funny how that even came up. It was the last question somebody asked at a press conference, just kind of as a joke. It was after that game. Everybody got into their questions, and somebody else just kind of jokingly said, "Can you tell us about your thought process that went into switching your windbreakers?" And he kind of looked at everybody and mocked the guy who asked the question, but then he chuckled himself, and then he said, "Well, truth be told, here's what happened." And it actually turned out to be a pretty newsworthy question that was asked there. So. Yeah. I'm glad that came out. That was interesting because right before that, it literally was when he walked out in the game with a white windbreaker. Everybody in the press box was like, "Whoa, this is different." I didn't know that he went away from the purple.
Jason, to you, how do you think Saturday's going to play out?
Well, I picked the Wildcats. I picked Kansas State 31-28. I think that OU has shown a lot of problems the last 2 weeks on offense, and they've also shown themselves to be susceptible to a mobile quarterback. And I think if it's a close game, I think Kansas State wins.
Yeah, I picked a relatively low-scoring game. I believe I went 21-17 OU. Don't feel extremely confident about that. I think this game could go either way, but I imagine it's going to be a very tight game into the fourth quarter. But that's all the time we have for today. Kellis, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, anytime, you guys. It was fun.
Sounds good.
All right. Yep. All right, man. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah, sure thing. We'll see you guys down there on Saturday.
All
right. Sounds good. Have a good trip down, Kellis.
All right, yep. See you then.
Talk
Bye.
to you later. Bye. You can check out Kellis's work every day on the Wichita Eagle and Kansas City Star websites. That's all for us. You can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU coverage anywhere.